the mindset, getting in the mindset of two things, okay? One is that history is a lot of perspective, okay? History is a lot of perspective. People can look at the same historical event and they can come to two totally different conclusions, right? And it means different things to them. Like, for example, if you paid even remote attention to what's been happening in our country in the last 5 months, you know that basically you have two perspectives about history. One is from the African American perspective, and that is, you know what, this crap has been going on for 400 years and we're sick and tired of it. The other perspective is, I never owned a slave, let's get over it. Pretty blunt, isn't it, Emma? Right? But that's exactly what you see people on Facebook posting. That's what you see on the internet. That's what you see on these TikTok videos that people will post and all kinds of other stuff, right? That's the perspective. And I'm sorry if I was blunt in that assertion, but that's really what it boils down to. History is a lot of perspective. The other thing that we'll note here starting today as well, and this is another kind of truism, if you will, of history, not even American history, but history in general, and that is history is written by the winners. History is written by the winners. They're the ones that get to be remembered. They're the ones whose heroes are, remembered and all that other good stuff. Think about it this way. Total hypothetical. Thank God it didn't turn out this way, but think about it this way. What if America would have dropped the atomic bomb on Japan and still lost? Truman would have been a war criminal and most certainly executed. Most of our generals and scientists would have been executed as war criminals, and we would have been seen as the villains of the world instead of the heroes of the world. Same event, nothing changed except the outcome. You see what I'm saying? History is written by the winners. Okay? And that's going to be very important starting today when we start taking a look at Christopher Columbus. His narrative has largely been dominant in world history because the Native Americans clearly lost. Okay? Now, we're going to kind of get into this a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit more about whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. But just kind of understand that that's really what we're talking about here. So here's what we want to do. If you, at this point, if you want to get out any notebooks or anything like that, this would be the time. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not forcing you to do anything. You can, again, do, quote unquote, do class however you want. But we're going to kind of get started talking about actual historical stuff and begin to look at anyway, how this is going to affect us even through today. Now, it's also at this point, by the way, if you're not going to use your computer for educational purposes, close it for now, and then we will we'll pick those back up here in one moment, in just a little bit. Also, last thing, as you guys are kind of getting prepared here, the first couple chapters, the slides are going to be quite full. They're going to be quite long. Keep in mind, I do not, and Brady Copel was so funny because his eyes just kind of glazed over. He's like, oh my God. You don't have to write everything down. Keep in mind, you have access to this already. You know what I'm saying? You already have access to this slideshow, so you don't have to write everything down. You can kind of do this however you want. If you want to jot a few things down here or there, that might be helpful. And then what we'll find is by the time we get to chapter 3 and chapter 4, the slides get more and more condensed, and you're going to be better able to pick up what's important and write it down. Does that make sense? Right? So I'm not just going to read you the slides. You guys can read. That's stupid. Instead, what I'll do is I'll just elaborate, add in some things here and there, and kind of give you a better understanding of what's going on. Does that help? So don't get too overwhelmed by the fact that the slides are full. You have access to this 24/7. Right? It's the exact same thing. Okay? All right. So the thing that we want to understand here is that Christopher Columbus was not the first one in America. That is point blank. I mean, that's common sense. I know most of you know this probably from world history and stuff like that, but we just want to make sure that from the American history perspective that we're all on the same page. humans, have been in what is now the Americas, plural, right, North and South America, for literally thousands of years. Okay, and they likely came over and archaeological evidence largely proves this on a land bridge between Russia and Alaska. Right? I think we all know the idea of plate tectonics. Yes, the idea that the Earth's crust shifts and moves. This is what causes volcanoes. This is what causes earthquakes. And at one point, in certain points, some of our continents are getting closer together, and some of them are drifting apart. Asia and North America are drifting apart. And the place they're drifting apart is right here between Russia and Alaska. So what happened over the course of thousands of years, people migrated and spread out throughout the globe. And many people were following, keep in mind they were hunters and gatherers, so what were they following? Yeah, animals. They were following animals. So they made their way across the land bridge. They didn't know, of course, it was a land bridge at the time. They just walked across, and from here, they began to, over the course of thousands of years, disseminate themselves throughout North and South America. And as they did, they began to evolve into different independent cultures. For example, you had the Incans and the Aztecs who evolved into a totally different culture than, say, the tribes of northeastern, what is today the northeastern United States and the woodlands found there. Or who, by the way, also evolved differently from, say, the plains tribes of like our neck of the woods today. Which, FYI, I'll just tell you this. Well, the dominant tribe today, when we think of South Dakota, what tribe do we think of? The Sioux or the Lakota. They were nowhere near here at that time. As a matter of fact, they got pushed here probably in the 1600s and have been there, for a relatively short amount of time. So they were native to here either. But anyway, so you have all of these people, and a thing, kind of another misleading kind of fact here that we got to think about is they were actually way more sophisticated than what Christopher Columbus and the Europeans gave them credit for. For example, the largest city in the world at that time, compared to Europe anyway, was not in Europe. It was actually in what is today Illinois. A Native American, a Native American city called Cahokia, which had about 15,000 people, had a rudimentary plumbing system, had a palisade wall to protect from invaders, all kinds of other stuff. It was, by the way, if you're thinking about it, it was almost twice as big as Paris, France. In the 15th century, it was twice as big as Paris, France at one point. So, for the Europeans to assert that the Native Americans were a backwards, uncivilized, heathen people is a little bit erroneous. It's wrong. It's not true. What if I also told you that not only was Christopher Columbus not the first one, he wasn't even the first European? Leif Erikson and the Vikings beat him to the New World by 500 years. Just a little short time. 500 years. The Vikings were very seafaring. They were very exploratory people. For example, I'm sure a lot of you understand it was the Vikings who discovered Iceland, and they also discovered Greenland, and then purposely mislabeled them to mess with them so that people would go to one and not the other. They wanted to keep Iceland for themselves, so they made it sound really, really cold, but they wanted people to go to Greenland because it would screw them up, even though it's all ice. So they purposely did it just to screw with people who were trying to dig in on their territory. But they did indeed go even past Greenland, past Iceland, and they discovered what is today Newfoundland in Canada. Okay, this large island of Newfoundland. And in fact, what they found was so green and lush compared to what they left in Norway and Sweden and places like that they called it Vinland. Vine land. Vinland. No E, by the way. Okay? Vinland, because it was so green and lush, not tropical, of course, but lots of vegetation. They even founded a settlement there. The settlement didn't last long, largely because of attacks from local native tribes. So they didn't last long. But they come back to Europe, right? After that first year, they come back to Europe and they begin to tell these wild stories about this lush, vegetated land. And nobody believes them. And the reason why nobody believes them is because of who the Vikings were. I mean, they were an exploratory seafaring people, but the problem is, largely, what did they use their boats to do to other Europeans? Yeah, rape, murder, pillage, and kill. Yeah, nobody liked them. So when they start spouting off all this crazy gobbledygook about this large ocean and land on the other side and blah, 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 they're like, oh yeah, okay. Right? These Vikings are freaking loco. Okay? And everybody dismisses it, and eventually the Vikings are overtaken by other groups anyway, and this kind of myth fades away, and everybody just kind of forgets about it. However, the Europeans will begin to become, as a whole kind of continent, more exploratory as well. And the reason why is not that they're not curious, right? They're not like Whiskers the cat. They're not like super curious. Instead, what they're looking for are resources. Why? Because resources equal what? Money. They're looking for wealth. And the more areas, the more land you control, chances are the more resources you will have access to. So what they want to do is they want to continue to explore. And one of the guys who really begins to push the envelope here is a guy from Portugal named Prince Henry the Navigator. And yes, he is an actual prince. He is royalty. But he's also kind of an explorer as well. And keep in mind that this was a dicey proposition at best. European ships at the time were extremely small. Like, for example, most of these ocean-going vessels were about the length of maybe 3 classrooms or so, and about as wide. They were glorified sailboats, really. So the chances of them surviving a long, big transatlantic voyage were very minimal, so guess what? They chose not to do it, because it would have been a suicide mission. Instead, Prince Henry the Navigator, rather than go west, he decides to go south. And he begins to map and explore the west coast of Africa. And this is going to be very important for us to understand later, because as he maps and explores more territory, of course, who does he claim that territory for? Portugal, right? He claims it for Portugal, his home country, okay? And they begin to set up a series of forts. And it's not long before they begin to trade with the African people. And unfortunately, it also doesn't take long before that trade includes what? Or I'll give you a big clue, whom? Slaves. The riches of the Portuguese Empire will be in people. And unfortunately, many of those people will eventually come to America. Okay? The guy who really breaks this wide open, though, is a guy by the name of Marco. There we go. I love that Geico commercial, by the way. Have you seen him with Marco Polo in the pool? They're like, Marco goes, see, it's a me. And then he catches on by the end, and they're like, oh, hey, see, Polo. And he's like playing this game with these kids in a pool. It's really fun. Anyway, he's like dressed out in like, Renaissance garb and stuff. It's fun. Anyway, so unlike the other guys on this list, Marco Polo was not a sailor, not necessarily. His real breakthrough, his real contribution here comes with an overland expedition to Asia. An overland expedition, which, by the way, in and of itself, without roads, was a feat in of itself. Dealing with bandits, dealing with weather, dealing with mountains, deserts, right? Wind, rain, sun, whatever, like he's the freaking post office. Marco Polo will not only make it to Asia, he'll make it into China, he'll make it into Mongolia, he'll make it into India, but the remarkable thing is that he actually freaking makes it back. And when he comes back, he brings a caravan of horses full of exotic stuff that the Europeans have never seen before. Silk and tea and nutmeg and all these other exotic perfumes and spices and all this other stuff. And because it's new, and because the Europeans love it because it is new and exotic and cool, what happens to the price of it? Goes sky high. And now you have other people who are saying, holy crap, look at what Marco Polo's doing. That's where the money is. I should be doing this too. Now, here's the problem though. They don't want to be like Marco Polo and go all the way over to China and Mongolia and all over here by land and then go all the way back. Not only because it's long and dangerous, but also because you can't carry very much stuff back. You're limited by how much you can carry back. You're just taking horses, and they can only carry so much. You don't want to take wagons because then they'll get stuck and it's just all that other good stuff. The key here is how can we get ships? How can we get ships there? Well, let me phrase it. Can we get ships there? We don't know. Nobody has really explored any of this stuff over here yet. We have no clue. But there's one guy who has a really weird theory, and that guy is Christopher Columbus. Now, I want to dispel a myth, not only about Columbus, but about Europeans at the time. The idea is that they had no idea that the world was round. They thought it was flat. False. The Greeks proved beyond doubt that the world was round. They did that like 1,500 years prior. Everybody accepts that the world is round. They just don't know how big it is necessarily. Columbus actually almost made a fateful error. The Greeks calculated that the Earth was about 24,000 miles in circumference. They were only off by about 100 miles. It's pretty good. And Columbus said, nah, it's probably closer to about 18. Well, if you're going to travel that way, you better make pretty darn sure that you're right, because otherwise you're going to be stuck in the middle of the ocean with no water and no food, which he almost was, by the way. The other thing that his crazy idea then is that the way to get to the east is not the shortest way, is not to sail east, but to sail west. The way to get west or east is to go west. Now, he's not wrong necessarily. It's a globe, you'll get there eventually. But what major obstacle did they not plan for? All of this. They didn't plan on all this. They thought that it would basically cut the map in half and then fold it. That's what they thought would happen. Okay? So he comes up with this crazy idea that the best way to go, the fastest way to go east is to actually go west. And he's laughed out of almost every royal court in Europe except Spain. Spain views this as a relatively low-risk, high-reward opportunity. They're only going to give him 4 ships, and they're going to give him small crews and small sums of money and supplies. So even if he does not make it, have they really invested that much? No. But if, for chance, just out of chance, if he makes it and makes it back, now we have a chance to possibly make some money. Because every territory he explores, just like Prince Henry the Navigator, who is he claiming it for? Spain. And if you want to know how successful this turns out to be for the Spanish, I ask you this. How many places in the Western Hemisphere speak Spanish? A lot. A lot. That tells you how successful the Spanish were, and it's largely due to Christopher Columbus and his crazy theory about the globe. So they set off in 1492, and he was not, keep in mind, nobody's done this before, so he's not really sure. He has no idea how long it'll take. He's hoping it's right around 25-ish days. But he has no idea about the ocean currents in the Atlantic. He has no idea about the trade winds in the Atlantic. Oh, and by the way, he's also massively miscalculated how big the Earth is. He's in trouble. In fact, the crew is beginning to run out of hope and food and water. And then on the 33rd day, they sight land. And they take rowboats ashore, and he plants a flag, and he claims this land for Spain. And he names it San Salvador, which, by the way, look at that name, Salvador. What is that? What English word does that sound an awful lot like? Salvation. This land saved them from dying, basically. Now, He called it San Salvador. We know it by another name. It's the Bahamas. He actually wasn't too far from Florida. Yeah, okay, we call it the Bahamas. And it is that first contact that the painting that we want to look at here for today and the report that he mails, or not mails, but sends them, like he just dumps it in the post box. But the report that he sends back, that's where all that stuff comes from, is this first contact, okay? So it's at this point that I want you guys to go ahead and get out your computers, open up your documents and questions, and if you're comfortable, I hope you are, but if you're comfortable, you can keep the plexiglass between you if you wish. Or if your partner is not here, you can go ahead and pair up with somebody behind you, around you, together if you want, whatever. But go ahead and just really briefly discuss what you found. Maybe your partner found something that you didn't. Maybe they thought of something you didn't, or vice versa. I want you to bounce these ideas off each other, and this is something that we will definitely do all year. Okay, so we're gonna kind of collaborate together after you kind of try to figure it out for yourself here. So I'll give you just a couple minutes. Go ahead and discuss with your table partner, and then we'll come back here in just a moment. All right, go.
After the painting and why Columbus has gone to the island to spread the word of God. It says from the excerpt, your mind should resolve to make them Christians. As we were able to come to the island to gain wealth, power, and strip both land and gold. He implies what he says, put down God is a very great amount of gold in these details. The artist altered history to shine a better light upon Columbus and make him see the great
without a doubt, there's a very great amount of gold in
The second one is the painting and excerpt. It all shows the Lord. It also depicts them as very gentle people, where it says they're very gentle. Steel. And the preconceived notion that they're Indians from the coast of Asia, the artist and Columbus do a great job representing the Europeans. And it is the picture of awe of the Europeans and their great curiosity surrounds them.
I said, I think the natives are probably feeling defeated in the painting. It shows them off to the side and they run off to the side.
Yeah, like Chris It's also feel odd because they think of the presence of God is Columbus said. They are sure that we have come from
Columbus talks about how the native are eager to train.
And I said, I do Columbus more of a discoverer. He was the actually the first European to discover this land. And it says in the excerpt, the people of this island and all of the others that I have found and seen were not seen. Columbus found the story because it was culturally acceptable for the time.
I said it was discovered, but I said he like
Columbus was a hero in Spain for opening up the trading lines to America, as it says in the excerpt, they're willing to trade everything.
yeah, I wasn't like
Because Columbus discovered the world, credited that, but it was the first one, but he also was very hostile until now.
all people.
Closure of the population,
I really like
That's a tough question. I agree. All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look and see what you guys think. Now, some of these, especially let's say number 2 and 3, they're going to kind of mold together a little bit. They're very similar, they kind of flow together. So we'll kind of combine those two just, to a certain extent. But for right now, let's focus here on the painting. Who clearly is and literally the center of the painting? Columbus, right? And which guy is he? Which figure is he? He's clearly the one kneeling, looking up to the heavens. And why do you think he's doing that? What's he doing? Did he have a cramp from being in the boat for 33 days? Oh, okay. So he's praying or praising or whatever the case might be, right? He's like, oh, thank you, Jesus, for getting us here, right? And is that the only kind of religious overtone we find here? No. What else do you see? Oh, there's a friar or a monk holding a cross. What else do you see? Any other religious symbolism? Nicole?
There's people like kneeling down like crazy.
Yeah, okay. There's people like kneeling down, almost like worshiping as well. Good. Emma? The flag has a cross on it. The mast here has a cross on it as well. Absolutely. Yes, good. Okay. So combined with what we read in Columbus's report there, what is being implied as far as the reasons for coming to the New World?
He has come to spread the word of God.
Yes, that we are here to civilize and Christianize the heathens of the world. Now, we have to understand this. Is this true? No. Is this why they came?
No.
How can they do that if they didn't even know those people were there? Right? Let's be honest. What's the real reason they came here? Money. They came for money. Okay? And by the way, just as a side note, keep in mind that till the day he dies, he was dead set that he landed where? India, which is why he named the natives Indians. Okay? He was only about a third of the way to India. He didn't know that at the time. All right? So this painting then is told from which culture's perspective? The natives or European? Right. So here's a good question for you, and it's a good question. I know this because I actually asked it. Why would an artist, clearly after the fact, by the way, this is not a Snapchat photo, right? Hashtag no filter, hashtag no makeup, right? That's not what we're talking about here. This is a painting clearly done after the fact. So why would a European painter, after Christopher Columbus has already been on his voyage, why would he try to make us believe that the reason for the Europeans going to the New World was religious?
That way they look like good people.
Why would they look like bad people, Matt?
Well, if they went there just for power, then they would look greedy. So if you make it look like they're going there for like a religious reason, then it makes it look like better people.
Okay, what they're trying to do is make themselves look better in hindsight. And you said it exactly right. If you say that you're going there for their real reason, which was money, now you just look like a bunch of greedy fools. Okay, you look like a bunch of, Kanye, you look like a gold digger, right? Which literally they were. They were looking for gold, right? He even talks about that. Surely this land is full of gold. All right, well, Columbus, you are literally a gold digger. Anyway, but to say that you're coming for, to Christianize these people, that makes you sound way, way, way more better. More better? Wow, let's try that again. Way, way, way better. Okay? Absolutely. Okay. So this is maybe a little bit of skewing going on here. They're trying to make themselves feel better about what they did. And why would you have to make yourself feel better about what you did? Because you feel bad about what you did do. You feel a little guilty, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's look at this from another perspective, all right? Where, literally in the painting, where do you find the natives? Where are they? Are they front and center? No. They're on the fringes. What can we say? What does that indicate about the artist's attitude towards them? Are they important or not? No, they're just kind of there. They're there. They're on the outside. And put yourself in their shoes. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What do you think? What do you think? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Just look at their expressions. How are they portrayed? What do you think, Nicole? Frightened? Curious?
They look like they're in awe.
Almost like in awe. Like this chick's, I mean, she's thinking that this guy's gonna like do a magic trick with that cross or something, right? He's gonna turn into a dove? You got any doves up your sleeve? Yeah, they look frightened. They look curious. Some of them maybe look scared, nervous, confused. This guy clearly is like, what the crap? He's like, we got visitors here? Yeah. What's going on? Now, how are they, aside from their face, what else do you notice about them? Okay, first of all, right, he's like, what? Who are these people and what are they wearing? They're not wearing anything. The natives wear nothing. Now, I don't want to be that guy who is trying to bring down society or anything, but I'll say this. Think about it. If you really, really think about it, for the most part, clothes are a social structure. To a large extent, clothes are a social structure. I mean, obviously in South Dakota, come January, you need them to survive. I understand that. But if you live in the Bahamas and it's 80 every freaking day, do you really need clothes to survive? At that point, do they really serve a function? No. So the Europeans view that as what? If they saw a bunch of people running around naked, what would they view that as? Go ahead. Uncivilized, heathenistic, uncultured. So if we add all this together, what can we say is the European attitude towards the natives? Is it positive or negative? Are they looking at them from a position of superiority or inferiority? Superior. Now, follow me here because this is important to note. If you feel as though you're better than somebody else, better than a group of people, what does that give you the quote-unquote right to do to them? How can you treat them? You don't have no respect for them. And Columbus even says it. Look at that very last paragraph. With 50 men, we could what? We could subjugate them. We could make them do whatever we want. You know what we call subjugation? Slavery, control. We can do whatever we want. Why? Simply put, because we can. We're better than these people. It's like Lobo Jim. We're better than you, and we know it. Right? You guys have any idea what I'm talking about? Yeah, average Joe's. Okay, yeah, all right, dodgeball. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. And what's very, very important for us to note is that and by the way, do you think that attitude went away eventually? Think about it this way. Did the United States government, did we treat the Native Americans as equals? So how long did that attitude persist? You could argue that it still does.
Yeah, right.
Last I checked, we haven't eradicated racism. Not yet. Well, I like your optimism. Okay? Here's my point. We have to understand that assumed position of superiority, when did it begin? Immediately. And it hasn't gone away since in some cases. And what it will be is two things. Here's about perspective. From the European perspective, what happens next is the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. Wealth coming from the New World and going to Europe. That's one perspective. In other words, is that a good thing? For the Europeans, from their perspective, is that a good thing?
Yes.
It basically recreates their entire society. Think about it from the Native American perspective. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, some historians have used the word genocide. So you could say it's kind of serious. Now, whether you agree with that or not is a whole other story. Okay? History is a lot of perspective. So that being said, Columbus, discoverer or destroyer? Like we were talking about, I was talking with Saban about this. This is a hard question. It's a really hard question filled with, again, a lot of perspectives and things of that nature. Matt, what do you think?
I said he was a discoverer because he did what was culturally acceptable for the time. Like nowadays, he'd be a destroyer, but in the times, that was what was like culturally accepted around the world. And if anybody else would have been in his position, they would have done the same thing.
Okay, so we have to think about what's culturally appropriate for the time period, right? What he's talking about is actually a historical principle called presentism. We use our values and our morals and we project it on people in the past. Okay? Which can be a somewhat dangerous thing, but it's important for us to understand, again, history is a matter of perspective here. Okay? What else? Anybody else? Destroyer or discoverer? Man, I know it's 8th period. Okay. Ellie!
Hi.
Dang!
Hey.
How you doing? I forgot you were there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
I said that he was more of a destroyer because if he wanted to discover, I feel like he would have wanted to learn about the natives and what their way of life was. And instead of with the whole them grabbing the sword or whatever, I feel like he would have taught them about weapons and how they could influence their culture and help them.
So he clearly did not have any sort of benevolent means in mind. That he, just an explorer or discoverer doesn't usually trash the discovery that they're trying to discover. I use a lot of discovery, but you get what I'm saying, right? That maybe it's actually counterproductive to discovery in and of itself if you destroy what you're trying to discover. Okay. Okay. Oh, I had me thrown there for a second. I thought you had your hand up. Yes, please, Bethany, go ahead.
I said that he was more of a destroyer as well because he says that they're very gentle and do not know what it's like to be wicked.
Yes.
He knows their intentions, but his intentions are the complete opposite because he says they could easily overthrow them.
So you know that they are gentle and peaceful and have no weapons, and yet choose to subjugate them anyway. Okay? Please, Saber.
I said he was a discoverer. Obviously he didn't do it in the best way, but he brought he brought a whole civilization over to a new world, which helped us move forward. And it didn't result in the best results, but we moved forward as a civilization and bettered society.
So for better or worse, we are where we are today, to a large extent, because of some of the actions of Columbus and people like him. Now, this whole discussion is actually wrapped up in a lot of the stuff that we are talking about here in our current society today. Right? Is he a hero or is he not? How much should we learn about the not so great stuff in American history? And what should we do with that? How should that influence us and affect us today? For example, South Dakota is one of only a handful of states, I want to say 3 or 4, somebody can look this up if you're curious, but we're only one of 3 or 4 states in the country that does not recognize Columbus Day. Instead, what do we call it? Native American Day. Okay?
I would say maybe you think of him as a discoverer or destroyer based on where you live now.
Yeah, for sure.
In an urban area, you probably think highly of him, but where you're surrounded.
Sure. When 1/3 of our population is native, that changes our perspective a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. So I have just a few things here for you. We're tomorrow. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. Tomorrow we are going to watch a video clip. We're not going to watch it now, but it's talking about this exact thing, right? Columbus. What should be his legacy? How should we remember him? Okay. We'll do that at the beginning of the hour tomorrow. But before the bell rings here, just want to make sure to go over just a handful of things. That is Prince Henry the Navigator, by the way. And this area here, the coast here in the yellow, those are the areas that he was credited with mapping and quote unquote discovering. There you see the official portrait of Christopher Columbus, as well as the painting that we analyze here, and as well as his wanderings throughout the Caribbean. Right? Hispaniola, he gets credit for discovering, which is today modern day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Cuba as well. In fact, all told, he will make a total of 4 voyages to the New World. Okay? And where would we be without some memes? I like this one, actually. So we'll wrap up a little bit about Christopher Columbus tomorrow, and think about it this way, and this will kind of be foreshadowing to what we want to talk about here. Spain starts conquering much of the New World, and of course, Christopher Columbus says, hey, there's gold there, and guess what? Eventually he is right. So as Spain gets more and more, it gets richer and richer from the New World, what will other European countries seek to do? Start their own colonies as well. And we'll talk more about that then tomorrow. Okay? Questions? Okay, again, when the bell rings, just stay put for a few seconds, and then we'll get you out of here, okay?